In the vast expanse of space far beyond our own galaxy lies a tale that challenges everything we know about humanity. In 2012, Ridley Scott brought us Prometheus, a sci-fi masterpiece that delves deep into questions with no clear answers. Where do we come from? What is the meaning of life? The film opens in prehistoric times, on a world untouched by human civilization. Vast landscapes stretch out under uncharted skies, and primitive rivers flow through untamed valleys. It's here, amidst this raw beauty, that something extraordinary happens. A peculiar spacecraft hovers above a majestic waterfall, its silhouette against the sky a mystery waiting to be unraveled. A towering figure steps out of the ship, his presence both enigmatic and commanding. He stands by the edge of the waterfall, watching as the vessel ascends into the heavens. This alien race, known as the Engineers, reveals itself in all its glory. Stripped of their robes, their pale skin and chiseled abs stand out starkly against the backdrop of nature. They hold a container filled with an ominous black substance, black water, we call it. Without hesitation, they consume it. Pain sears through them as the black water begins to dismantle their very essence from within. Skin tears, flesh dissolves, and even DNA unravels before our eyes. The figure stumbles into the torrential waters below, disintegrating in the rushing stream. But this is only the beginning of a tale that spans eons. As time passes, the broken DNA pieces themselves together, forming new cells that evolve over millennia. The Engineers have sown the seeds of life on this primordial planet. Could it be our own Earth? Fast forward to 2089. Archaeologist Elizabeth Shaw and her lover Charlie Holloway discover an ancient mural in a cave on Scotland's Orkney Islands. It depicts tiny humans gazing up at a towering figure whose finger points towards a constellation in the sky. From their research, they deduce that this is not just one isolated finding. Similar murals appear across different civilizations and eras, each separated by vast distances and time. Yet, all depict the same giant and the same star map. Shaw concludes that ancient humans revered these giants as real visitors from another world, extraterrestrial beings who shaped human history and might even be our creators. She names this race the Engineers and begins to unravel their legacy through the stars they left behind. The star map etched on the walls he interpreted as an invitation from the Engineers to humanity, a message like a parent leaving directions for their child. When human civilization had grown sufficiently mature, it would follow these coordinates and learn from the ancient language of the Engineers. Backed by the global tech giant Whale and Corp, this mission was funded with a staggering $1 trillion. 5 years later, the Prometheus, a state-of-the-art interstellar research vessel, set sail with 17 top-tier scientists aboard, all in suspended animation to conserve life support resources. The ship's operations were entirely managed by the android David 8, who oversaw the crew's health and safety as well as their language training. When not working, David would ride his bike through empty corridors or play basketball alone, even styling his hair like Lawrence of Arabia. His favorite scene depicted Lawrence extinguishing a match with his fingers, responding to someone's question about pain by saying it didn't matter if he felt it. This mantra subtly influenced the android. On Earth, Elizabeth Shaw's father was a devout Christian who taught her that different cultures had different beliefs about what happens after death. When her father died, she found herself questioning where life came from and where one went after death. a quest that shaped her as a scientist who still wore a cross around her neck, using science to find answers while turning to faith for those unanswerable questions. After 2.5 years of interstellar travel, the Prometheus approached LV-223. David began waking the crew from their deep hibernation, leaving them dizzy or nauseous after such a long slumber. Meredith Vickers, whale and stern overseer, forced herself to do push-ups immediately upon awakening to quickly recover. As the crew rehydrated and refueled, Vickers briefed everyone on their mission. Only then did many realize why they had traveled over 30 light-years to find answers from the engineers who created them. The holographic image of Wayland Corp. As founder, Peter Wayland appeared, now frail but claiming he was long gone. He called David 8 his closest son immortal, invincible, and almost superhuman in intelligence. But Wayland added that David lacked a soul. Though David showed no outward reaction, this statement resonated deeply within him. Humanity had created an artificial life form more intelligent and longer lived than itself, yet without the essential spark of consciousness. After Wayland's speech, Elizabeth Shaw and Charlie Holloway stepped forward to reveal their findings. These discoveries span different eras and regions, ancient civilizations that were completely unaware of each other, but shared the same mysterious symbols. The coordinates from these symbols all pointed toward LV-223. Shaw believed the engineers had indeed set up a waiting room there, anticipating human visitors. Holloway was even more excited, eager to prove not only the existence of the engineers, but also to ask their creator directly why they had created humanity. Following the meeting, David led Shaw and Holloway into Meredith Vickers' private escape pod. This pod featured its own living quarters and a highly advanced automated medical bay capable of performing complex surgeries without a doctor's presence. However, there was one peculiar detail. It was only set up for male use. Why would a female escape pod be equipped with machinery that serves exclusively men? The answer to this mystery would come later. Vickers had called them here to issue strict orders. If they discovered living engineers, they were not allowed to make contact without company approval. Shaw tried to argue, but Vickers' next words left her no choice but to comply. It appeared Vickers was trying to control the risk, but it also suggested that Wayland Corporation's funding had ulterior motives. The Prometheus then entered orbit around LV-223 and began sending friendly signals to the surface. However, there were no responses. Atmospheric analysis revealed 71% nitrogen, 21% oxygen, and over 3% carbon dioxide. While the oxygen level was close to Earth's, the high concentration of CO2 made it lethal. Inhaling for just 2 minutes could result in suffocation. The planet was also electrically charged with frequent lightning strikes, making the environment extremely harsh. The tallest mountain on LV-223 stood at 52,000 meters, dwarfing even Mount Everest. As the ship navigated through treacherous atmospheric layers, a sudden change in scenery revealed an endless expanse of rocky terrain. There was no detectable electrical activity or heat sources, and life signs were scarce. Just when everyone thought they might have made a fruitless journey, several straight lines resembling roads suddenly appeared on the horizon. Continuing forward, they spotted a series of large domed structures lining up at the edge of the plains. Their uniformity suggested that humanity was not alone in the universe. Advanced extraterrestrial life had visited this place before. The moment the ship landed, as the ship touched down, Charlie Holloway immediately demanded an exploration. The team quickly suited up and rushed to the buildings in their rover. With excitement, Holloway quoted Armstrong's famous line from the moon landing. From the dilapidated exterior, it was clear these structures were at least thousands of years old. Upon entering, geologist Janik deployed several spherical probes he called dogs. These devices autonomously flew through the corridors, using lasers to scan their surroundings. As data streamed in, a detailed 3D map of the building quickly appeared on the ship's screens. Following this map, they ventured deeper into the structure. Inside, the atmosphere was surprisingly different from the outside, air fresher than Earth's and temperatures rising. Clearly, an environmental system maintained conditions suitable for human life. Holloway removed his helmet, and seeing him unharmed, the others did the same. Though often criticized for its lack of realism, this scene hinted at a crucial fact. Humans and engineers shared similar atmospheric requirements, suggesting they might have originated from the same biological template. Continuing their journey, the team followed the map deeper. Behind them, David noticed an engraved pattern on the wall. Curious, he pressed it, and suddenly, a 3D image materialized before them. It showed several engineers fleeing in panic, turning back as something terrifying pursued them. Driven by curiosity, the group followed the image. The last engineer fell at a stone door, which then slammed shut, severing his head. Upon inspection, they found a massive, headless corpse outside. This was humanity's first encounter with extraterrestrial life, so shocking that Holloway nearly lost his breath. Geologist Fifield grew fearful, insisting he only studied rocks and refused to risk his life. He urged biologist Milburn to return to the ship, leaving behind this unknown place. The two groups parted ways. Back at the corpse, Dr. Shaw conducted tests revealing it had been dead for about 2,000 years. Unbeknownst to them, David had quietly scaled a high point and opened the stone door from inside. The severed head rolled into the room where they found a massive statue resembling human features, surrounded by strange jars. The space felt both like a sacred temple and a bioweapon storage facility. On the walls was a large mural depicting an alien creature similar to the xenomorphs. This image suggested that before David's experiments, engineers had already encountered such life forms, making his claim of being the sole creator of the xenomorph species less accurate. The engineers had long mastered related biological technologies, and the xenomorphs were merely a result of David's inheritance of these advancements. The xenomorphs were the result of David's continued genetic experimentation after inheriting the engineers' technology. Perhaps the opening of the stone door altered the environment, causing the temperature in the room to fluctuate and black liquid to seep from the walls. Even the small insects in the soil had unknowingly come into contact with this dark water. Above them, the ancient murals began to shift, alerting Elizabeth Shaw that something was amiss. She quickly realized they needed to leave, but her assistant was busy packing the engineer's head for study. Meanwhile, David discreetly took a black container without anyone noticing. The storm was far more intense than expected, with debris flying everywhere as vehicles raced toward the ship at full speed. Unfortunately, just as they were about to enter, the bag containing the engineer's head fell off. Shaw sprinted back through the storm to retrieve it, barely managing to escape with David's help. Back on the ship, Fifield and Milburn were still exploring the ruins, lost in the labyrinthine corridors. They would have to wait for the dust to settle before sending a rescue team. They'd spend a long night hunkered down. Shaw was eager to study the engineer's head upon her return. The scans revealed it was merely a helmet concealing the actual head inside. Removing the helmet exposed a face eerily human, with features reminiscent of ancient Greek and Roman sculptures, perfectly lifelike and divine-like, reflecting the design team's vision for these beings as humanity's closest approximation to gods. She tried to stimulate the brain by inputting electricity, hoping to trick it into thinking the head was still alive. As the current surged to 40 amperes, a miraculous scene unfolded. The head slowly opened its eyes, but with an unsettling twist. Black blood began to flow, and the head rapidly expanded, clearly not normal. Elizabeth Shaw immediately ordered the current reduced, but it was too late. Undeterred, Shaw continued her analysis on the sample, revealing a shocking discovery. The alien head shared both appearance and DNA with humans. This finding overturned Darwin's theory of evolution, confirming that humanity originated from giants. Meanwhile, in an undisclosed corner, David stood before a dormant chamber, respectfully addressing the occupant as Sir. He secretly reported his findings, only to be questioned by Meredith Vickers. She pressed him on who he had been communicating with, but David politely dodged her inquiries. David then produced a mysterious container filled with 4 glass vials wrapped in a sticky substance. He broke one and placed the black liquid on his finger for inspection. To test its effects, David devised an evil plan. He offered a bottle of wine to Charlie Holloway, slipping his finger into the cup unnoticed. Holloway drank it all without suspicion. Back in her quarters, Shaw excitedly shared with Holloway the news that engineered DNA was nearly identical to human DNA. But new questions arose. Who created the engineers? The answer might remain unknown, but Holloway believed he could create humans just as easily. Unintentionally, his words stung Shaw, who couldn't bear children. Realizing her mistake, Holloway quickly apologized, and they spent a passionate night together in space. Little did either of them know that the black liquid David had added to the wine had entered Shaw's body through Holloway. At this moment, conventional human reproduction transformed into an alien parasitic infection. Back on the ship, Janik detected movement within the structure. Fifield and Milburn rushed to investigate, only to find more engineer corpses piled in front of a stone door, their bodies seemingly torn apart from the inside out. This scene echoed the iconic xenomorph emergence from the chest in the Alien series, suggesting that 2,000 years ago, something far more sinister than a chemical leak may have killed the engineers. Through the ship's scanner, Janik informed Fifield and Milburn of another living entity moving within the structure. They fled to the chamber where the mysterious vials had been, only to find the black liquid had spilled everywhere. The black liquid from the mysterious container had spilled out completely. Suddenly, Fifield noticed something wriggling in it. The tiny bugs, influenced by the black liquid, transformed into a white snake-like monster. This creature was later dubbed the Hammerpede. As the strange being floated to the surface, biologist Milburn showed great interest and moved closer instead of retreating. Just as he did, the monster spread its wings clearly in an attack stance. Before Milburn could touch it, the Hammerpede attacked, wrapping itself around his arm with terrifying strength. In a moment, Milburn's arm was severed. Fifield had no choice but to use his knife to cut off the creature. However, the monster's blood was corrosive and burned through Fifield's helmet almost instantly. The severed part of his arm grew back into another head. The next day, Holloway woke up feeling as if his body had been drained. Looking in the mirror, he saw tiny creatures moving in his red eyes. He realized he might have contracted something, but before they could deal with this, the captain urgently called everyone to search for Fifield and Milburn, who had gone missing. Concerned about his teammates' safety, Holloway didn't pay much attention. Upon arriving at the scene, they found only Milburn's body, but Fifield was nowhere to be seen. Just as they approached Milburn's body, a hammerbead emerged from its mouth before vanishing back into the black liquid. Holloway's condition worsened. He sat on the ground in agony. Shaw quickly came over and suspected he had been infected by some unknown virus. They had no choice but to return to the ship for isolation treatment. Unbeknownst to them, David had already left the group, venturing down another corridor. With his knowledge of ancient languages, he sensed there were more secrets here. He opened a gate leading to an even larger chamber filled with countless mysterious containers like rows of ammunition. If the black liquid could transform ordinary bugs into terrifying hammerbeads and humans into infected beings, then such vast storage suggested this wasn't for medical research but rather a military base producing biological weapons. David entered the ship's cockpit and activated the holographic recordings left by the engineers. An engineer sat in the pilot's seat, using voice commands to activate the entire system. A massive star map unfolded around David as he quickly realized that the engineer's final destination was Earth. David soon realized that the engineer's ultimate destination was Earth. Transporting so much lethal black oil to our planet wasn't about spreading warmth. It was something far more sinister. But little did they know, an unexpected accident occurred before their departure. What thrilled David even more was a nearby cryogenic pod. He lay down and listened intently, hearing a faint heartbeat inside. That moment made the corners of his lips curl upward in anticipation. On the other side, Charlie Holloway's infection had spiraled out of control. Black patterns spread across his skin as his body rapidly deteriorated. But when they reached the door to the cryo chamber, Meredith Vickers stood there with a flamethrower, blocking their path. She wouldn't allow any infected aboard the Prometheus. Holloway knew he was beyond help and didn't want to risk spreading this unknown infection to his crewmates. He approached Vickers, asking her to end his life. She complied, firing the flamethrower directly at him. Holloway fell before their eyes, leaving Elizabeth Shaw heartbroken as she fainted. When she awoke, David told her he was pregnant 3 months along. Elizabeth immediately knew something was amiss. She couldn't conceive and had only been with Charlie for a few hours. This fetus was clearly abnormal, likely connected to the black oil incident from last night. She demanded immediate medical treatment, but David insisted on putting her into stasis and taking her back to Earth for study. David seemed to understand and, while Elizabeth wasn't looking, injected her with anesthetic, planning to put her in stasis and bring her home. But Elizabeth wouldn't go quietly. As they prepared to place her in the cryo chamber, she feigned unconsciousness, springing into action. She overpowered them both, then quickly made her way to Vickers' luxurious single cabin. The only hope was a medical device designed for males. With no other choice, Elizabeth hacked the machine's instructions, cutting open her abdomen and removing the alien entity inside. This scene, the most harrowing in the film, introduced the terrifying creature known as the Trilobite, a monstrous being that would become central to their desperate quest for answers. This creature, known as the Trilobite, was born from the black water within Charlie Holloway's body. It spread through human reproductive systems, creating a new form of parasitic life. Unlike in traditional alien movies where only men are forced to carry and give birth to the creature, Prometheus showed how an infertile woman could create new life. Shaw quickly exited the medical bay, sealing the Trilobite inside. He then fled, accidentally entering a hidden chamber. There he saw the supposedly deceased Peter Weyland still alive, hiding on the ship in cryogenic stasis. Vickers' escape pod was designed for this old man, and she was actually his daughter Peter's biological child. But to Weyland, the nearly perfect David seemed more like an ideal successor than his own flesh and blood. This explained why Vickers harbored such animosity toward David. While he created a son who would never age, he relegated his real daughter to second place. Weyland's obsession with immortality wasn't about humanity, it was for himself. David discovered another engineer still alive, so Weyland planned to meet this creator, but Shaw warned that things were far more complex than they seemed. The engineers might not be as benevolent as believed. He decided to seek answers alongside his crewmates. Meanwhile, Fifield suddenly reappeared outside Prometheus, his suit severely damaged and in a bizarre posture. A crew member approached him only for Janek to spring up, attacking with ferocity. The Blackwater had turned him into a zombie. He began viciously attacking other crew members. Even as flames engulfed him, his gun was useless. The ship suffered heavy losses until a crewman used a rover to crush him. The captain arrived with a flamethrower and finally subdued the threat. Originally, Fifield's design had been more alien-like, with an elongated face merging with his helmet. But the filmmakers chose a more zombie-like appearance instead. Before leaving, the captain deduced that this planet wasn't where the engineers lived. It was likely their military base used for experiments on the Blackwater, which produced terrifying creatures. Something went wrong, leading to their downfall. The captain advised immediate departure. No civilization would keep such a dangerous facility near its home. Thus, the true mother of the engineers must be elsewhere, in the vast unknown. This setting ties together the creation cycle and Prometheus. The engineers birthed humanity. Humans gave rise to David, and the engineers crafted a biological weapon. Yet each creator met their downfall at the hands of their own creations. Before departure, Meredith Vickers tried one last time to stop her father, warning Weyland about the dangers ahead. But Weyland paid no heed, barely acknowledging his daughter as she watched him board the engineer's ship. As they entered the vessel, David, following holographic instructions, skillfully activated the system and initiated the final cryo chamber. The engineer, awakening after 2,000 years, stood slowly, looking around with confusion. Weyland hurriedly ordered David to ask how he could escape death. Shaw tried to press for answers about humanity's creation, but Weyland cared only about immortality. David addressed the engineer in its own ancient language. The giant seemed to understand this time, glanced at Weyland, and gently stroked David's head. Just as everyone thought they might communicate, the engineer grabbed David's neck, pulling his head from his body with a violent tug. He then turned on Weyland, who was helpless against the engineer's strength. The team tried to intervene, but their weapons proved ineffective. The creator approached the higher beings, but these deities saw only a threat in humanity's advancements, superior intelligence, longevity, and interstellar travel. To the engineer, this wasn't a sign of greatness, it was a warning that humans had become too dangerous, potentially threatening their own existence. The engineer ignored Sean's escape to focus on his ultimate plan, destroying the human race he created. He activated the hidden pilot's seat beneath the ship and donned his iconic rubber helmet. The three-dimensional star map came to life as he set course for Earth, revealing the true nature of the iconic space jockey's seat from Alien. As the ship began to rise, Shaw escaped through an opening and raced back toward the Prometheus. When the subterranean vessel ascended, Vickers called out to the Prometheus, If this craft carrying black material reached Earth, it would spell doom for humanity. But the research vessel lacked the firepower to stop the engineer's ship. The determined captain, however, prepared to sacrifice himself by launching the ion drive, turning the Prometheus into a bomb and ramming it into the engineer's vessel. Before his final act, he ejected Vickers' luxurious single-person pod onto the planet's surface, giving those who wished to escape that option. In the end, only the cowardly Vickers fled, while the rest of the crew chose to die with their captain. As the remaining crew decided to die with their captain, they watched Prometheus ignite its engines in a desperate bid to collide with the engineer's ship. The ring-shaped vessel began to plummet from above, out of control. Vickers had already escaped in her pod and was making for the ground, while Shaw struggled to flee nearby. Faced with the massive wreckage hurtling toward them, both had no choice but to run as fast as they could. Shaw managed to use terrain to roll safely aside just before impact, but Vickers couldn't avoid it. The colossal ship's debris crushed her under its weight, a scene that would become infamous for viewers' frustration. Why didn't she just run sideways? From the audience's perspective, sidestepping made more sense, but in such an extreme situation, fear and instinct override rational thought. Despite surviving, Shaw was running out of oxygen. The only shelter nearby was Vickers' private pod. Dragging her injured body back inside, he heard a sudden noise from the medical bay. With a careful grip on an axe, she approached cautiously. What he found was horrifying. The creature he had delivered, which had grown to fill most of the medical room in just a few hours. The door held for now, but the sound of multiple tentacles writhing inside sent a chill down his spine. Suddenly, David's voice crackled over the communicator. As a synthetic, David's head remained intact and functional. He warned Shaw that an engineer had survived the crash and was approaching their pod. Before she could react, the engineer tore through the door, only to be ensnared by the creature's tentacles. The engineer fought desperately, but was no match for the octopus-like monster. In this moment of crisis, it was this very creature born from Shaw's body that saved Shaw's life. With a renewed sense of purpose, Shaw escaped just as the storm began to subside. Exhausted and nearly out of hope, she stumbled through the wreckage until David's voice once again echoed in her ear. He told her they still had a chance to leave this planet. Each ancient structure hid a ship below, and he had learned how to pilot these alien vessels. Shaw follows David's signal into the wreckage and recovers his severed head and damaged body. David tells her that other engineer ships remain buried beneath the surrounding structures, and that he has learned enough of their systems to pilot one. After everything she has endured, the massacre, Holloway's death, and the creature torn from her body, Shaw still puts the cross back around her neck. She refuses David's suggestion that they return to Earth. Home can wait. Shaw came here for answers, and now her questions are even more urgent. Why did the engineers create humanity? Why did they later decide to destroy it? With David as her reluctant guide, she activates another ship and sets a course for the engineer's homeworld. But one final horror remains on LV-223. Inside the wrecked lifeboat, the enormous trilobite has died after overpowering the last engineer. Then the engineer's abdomen begins to convulse. A new creature tears its way out, a tall, blue-gray hybrid later known as the Deacon, an early relative of the xenomorph. Prometheus ends without giving humanity the comforting answer it wanted. Weyland tried to defeat death with wealth and technology, only to die at the feet of his maker. The engineers created humans, humans created David, and every creator discovered that creation cannot be fully controlled. The film leaves us with a darker question. If we finally met our makers and learned that they did not love us or even regretted creating us, would our lives lose their meaning? Shaw chooses to keep searching. Perhaps purpose is not something handed down by gods. Perhaps it is something living beings must create for themselves in a silent universe.